The hidden benefits and negatives of a weekend job. What no one tells you about working two jobs. So if you're new here, I work Monday to Friday as an accountant, which is my full-time career job, but I also work every single weekend, both days, at a supermarket. This can be rather confusing for many people, especially boomers, who look down on the lower skilled roles at a supermarket. Why are you working as an accountant, widely considered a prestigious career, and then also work at the supermarket, widely considered one of the lowest prestige jobs? I find most people younger than 30 understand this, but many people in the older generation don't. They fail to realize the impact of the expansion in M2 money supply devaluing the purchasing power of fiat currency. For those of you who aren't into the whole finance/stock market realm like I am, that basically means the stuff you can buy with your money has decreased over time. So maybe when they were 27 years old, like I am now, they didn't have any reason to work two jobs, especially if one of them was prestigious, like an accountant. So I've worked at my supermarket job for 11 years now, and I've also worked at my accounting job for almost 3 years. I started in January of 2021. I had a small stint of working 7 days a week back in late 2019 to early 2020, but I lost that job due to COVID. Story for another time. In fact, I've kind of already mentioned it before. So for all intents and purposes, I've worked roughly 7 days a week for almost 3 years now. Of course, I have days off here and there, such as public holidays. In 2021 and most of 2022, I would tend to work at my supermarket job on the public holidays, since I had the day off my office job, so I'd be getting paid for the day off from the office, since public holidays are paid for, whilst making more than 2 times my hourly rate at the supermarket due to penalty rates from the public holidays. So even then, I still wouldn't have a day off on public holidays. This was because the old store I worked at was so short-staffed that there was always hours available. And since we were a smaller store, only 7 aisles, we naturally had less staff. Hence, less people to cover shifts. Hence, why I'd get them. We've since moved to a new, larger store, 15 aisles, so we have way more staff, many of which are under the age of 20, which means they get paid less than adult wage per hour. So the supermarket prefers to have them work the public holiday penalty rates as opposed to the adult staff like myself, since I cost the company more per hour. So the point is, I get public holidays off now, but for most of 2021 and 2022, this wasn't the case. I do of course take some annual leave days though. Both of my jobs just let me have whenever I want off, which is fortunate. Some workplaces are terrible like that, but you can always move jobs. So if your workplace sucks, build up your skills and then leave for a better workplace. You can't really take that much time off around Christmas at the supermarket though, especially Christmas Eve, but anyway, I do have days off. I haven't worked 7 days straight for the last 3 years. I take time off to study for my CPA exams, which is like a post-tertiary qualification. It's above university/college for anyone who doesn't know. This increases my market skills/market rate and allows me higher salaries in the future. I also can't work on Good Friday or Christmas Day since both jobs are closed those days, so those are guaranteed days off for me. Well, days off a job that is, the grind doesn't stop, I'm always doing something productive each day. So that's a bit of preamble. I'll go over the pros and cons of working 7 days a week, and more specifically, the pros of a supermarket job. However, if you work part-time/casually at other places like a warehouse, fast food joint, restaurant, etc., you may want to stick around since some of the benefits I'm going to list apply to those fields as well. I've already spoken about the pros and cons of working 7 days a week before, but this video has some updated reasons/ideas, especially in relation to investments. If you're keen to get ahead in life down the track, I'd suggest listening carefully to what I have to say about the investment part specifically. It might change your perspective on working a second job. So here is the outline of what I'll go over, and before you click off thinking you know all the benefits to this second job, think again. You may not fully understand each of these benefits of these areas. Number 1, more money. Duh. Okay, so first, you make more money from a second job.
Oh, really?
Such genius insights here, but I'll go over how much extra I make. You might be surprised how much extra this second job makes me. Now, here in Australia, our minimum wage is $23.23 per hour, but the supermarket jobs pay slightly higher than this, at a base level of $25.13 per hour. However, working on the weekends gives you extra penalties. So Saturday gives a 25% multiplier, and Sundays gives a 50% multiplier. So I make around $31.41 per hour on a Saturday and $37.69 per hour on a Sunday. I've gone over my pay slips in detail before. There's some extra stuff like cold allowance, which is an extra 34 cents per hour worked, and a laundry allowance, but that's just complicating things. Case in point, I make more than $30 an hour when I work at my supermarket job. Now, it's important to note I live in Australia. A lot of you overseas viewers probably won't get this sort of income working at supermarkets in your area. However, note that our currency is likely weaker than yours. The Aussie dollar is weaker than the US dollar, the euro, the Great British Pound, and the Canadian dollar, for example. So take my hourly supermarket rate, then multiply that by the foreign exchange rate. If you're getting a similar rate in your country, then you're making basically the same as I am. I feel people don't quite get this since Australia's currency is the dollar.
$900 dues, Tobias.
Which is what the United States uses, which is what most people think of when they hear the word dollar. Example, 6 figures in dollar terms is widely considered a fantastic income. Even though you can get 6 figures in countries like Colombia and Japan, but no one gloats about making 6 figures in those currencies. So the reason I bring that up is, don't think that I'm on some sort of enormous advantage working at my supermarket job here in Australia compared to your country. Although our minimum wage is much higher than most countries, when you factor in exchange rates and currency strength, I'm probably not earning that much extra than you would. Well, that perspective is for my viewers in developed countries. Obviously, this is different if you're working in Southeast Asia, for example, but keep in mind the prices of most things over there would be substantially lower than they are here. So whatever your supermarket pays you over there potentially buys you the same stuff it would here. Now, as for the hours, I work 8 to 5 Saturdays and 1 to 10 Sundays. This is my part-time contract. I got this over time by being the better employee by default. Once the more senior people leave, hours open up. I was the priority to get the longest shifts, so getting these hours took years of waiting around for people to leave, and of course being at least somewhat competent at the job. So if you're applying for new part-time jobs, don't expect to be getting these sorts of hours straight away. No chance I'd get these hours if I was to leave the supermarket job and then come back in 6 months. I'd have to start with smaller shifts and slowly wait around and work back up. I've talked about this before, but if I didn't have a contract, I definitely wouldn't be getting these hours. I'd likely get shorter shifts. But since I have a contract, they can get rid of me or change my contracted hours. Yippee! So let's math up. So that's $29,000 per year from working every weekend. And when you factor in the extra that gets put into my retirement fund, as mandated by the Aussie government, that's more than $30,000 a year from working on my weekends. At the time of this video, I've made almost $90,000 since 2021 just by working each weekend. Those days will have flown by regardless, so I'd rather have made that $90,000 rather than sitting at home every day on the weekend. Side note, I am able to have social events on a Saturday night since I don't start working until 1 PM on a Sunday, so I can stay out late. So yes, you can still have a social weekend if you worked my weekend contract. If you wanted to get away each weekend, then no, you can't do this, but I'm more an introvert anyway, so going out every weekend isn't my thing. Plus, surely that gets super expensive, and surely you don't feel the need to go out every weekend. If you do, that's cool, I suppose, but damn, couldn't be me. I'd need some alone time. I use my Saturday nights for an upper gym session, meal prep, and some work on my brand anyway. Very enjoyable for me. We also get staff discounts from work, so there's a little extra money saved as well, depending on what you buy from groceries and petrol. For me, the benefits tend to hover somewhere between $550 and $600 per year in staff benefits. So that's like an extra weekend of work for free. You'll take that for sure. So to wrap it up, I make $500+ a week extra from working weekends. I can still have a social Saturday if I want. I make upwards of $30,000 a year just from working these weekends. And over 3 years, you're almost making an extra 6 figures from just doing this, when the time is going to pass anyway. Number 2, time value of money, investments. So this money doesn't sit around doing nothing. Well, sometimes it does, but the idea of making money isn't just to say how much you make. Like, I don't work at the supermarket job to tell everyone I make 6 figures combined between both of my jobs. There's a practical benefit to making this extra money. So yeah, the idea of making money isn't to say how much you make, you need something to show for it. As I mentioned at the start, the value of money dwindles over time. What you could buy for $10,000 back in 1980 doesn't buy you the same stuff it does in the 2020s. This is only going to continue. The central banks want inflation, albeit around 2% per year, and the economic system is designed to slowly devalue money too. Heresy Financial makes an argument that we don't actually need inflation to encourage spending, which is another point I quickly made in my last video, but that's outside the scope of this video. So of course, this money could go into stocks, which is usually what people think of when thinking of investments. So your weekend efforts are going even further. You're making money by utilizing your weekends, and that money is increasing in value by being put into an appreciating asset. But the appreciating asset I have my sights on is not stocks, despite it being a big part of the game of life. The appreciating asset I have my sights on is real estate. Now here in Australia, our tax system and government policies literally incentivize investments in real estate, and most of our politicians have multiple investment properties. Do you really think they're going to introduce legislation changes to hinder the price appreciation of real estate when they themselves have a vested interest in it? Hell no. So unfortunately, those are the rules in this server, being Australia. So as a player in the game of life, I will play according to the rules. I'll touch on this later. So since real estate is only going to become more unaffordable, the more money I get earlier on, the sooner I can get into real estate. And from there, the capital appreciation in my property will literally outpace any salary increases from my career, especially any increases from my supermarket job. Why move to a job that pays $15,000 more per year, adds a heap more stress, when you could just get into an asset class that earns you way more than $15,000 a year for doing nothing? Plus, there's also tax benefits involved, but once again outside the scope of this video. There's also rental income you can receive from renting out rooms in your house and renting out your investment property. So that's a mostly passive source of income. All because you decided to utilize your weekends to get ahead whilst you were younger. I've spoken more in depth regarding the real estate investment in videos past. Check out these if you want more information, but for the purposes of this video, if I decided to leave my supermarket job in early 2021, not only would I not have the deposit required for my current house/land, but I wouldn't get the loan from the bank since the salary from my accounting job isn't enough to service the debt needed for this land/house I'm getting. For reference, it's a 388 square meter block of land, which isn't huge, but it's pretty big for the area of Australia that the block is situated in. They tend to release smaller blocks of land than this. This is also in a good area, about 10 minutes from the main city and 10 to 15 minutes from a few beaches. This size block of land also allows me to fit a 4-bedroom house on it, aka 3 spare rooms to rent, whereas most blocks around the area can only fit 3 bedrooms, thus only 2 spare bedrooms to rent out. Additionally, the increased land size gives me more capital growth. Again, spoken about in prior videos, but simply put, capital growth allows you to buy more properties, or even just cash it out and have some spare money to do with what you want, all because you just bought some land. Think of it sort of like as a stock. Like you buy into a stock and then it goes up in value over 10 years and now you can sell it for more money, right? Or you could just take out the profits you made from that stock and then keep your initial investment in it. The same thing works with land. If my land's valued at $325,000 when I buy it and then in 5 years it's worth $500,000, I can use most of that extra money to buy a new house or even just cash it out and do what I want with it. There's like more involved with that. It's more complicated than that. So do your own homework, but I'm not going to delve into it for the sake of this video. All you need to know is I'm getting into an appreciating asset early. My full-time accounting job alone would allow me a small unit or an apartment for sure, but not a decent sized house in a good area. The capital growth and rental income strategy doesn't quite work with apartments or units since they're too small / just a piece of the sky, which is not finite the way land is. You can't make more land, which is why I say go for the house on a bigger block of land rather than like an apartment or a small unit. The small unit simply doesn't have that much land and the apartment is just a piece of the sky. Of course, these can go up in value, but generally houses on land go up in value a lot quicker and a lot more than the other two. So yeah, you get land because land's finite. You can't make more land. Unless you're Team Magma from Pokemon Ruby or unless you're in Dubai, but even those ideas didn't quite work out, did they? Plus, a smaller unit / apartment means less or no rental income since there's less or no spare rooms to rent out. So to summarize this section, working on my weekends in my late 20s / early 30s, maybe beyond, allows me access to the best investment in Australia before prices get too far out of reach for me, that being real estate, and the land / house I can afford from the additional income from the supermarket job is a much better investment than what my full-time job could afford me. Number 3, cash flow. So, no shit, working a second job gives you more money, thus more cash flow. But let's dissect this a little more. I get paid fortnightly from the office gig. Most places do this to cut down on time used for payroll. And I've even heard of some places paying monthly. Yikes. But my supermarket job pays weekly, so each week I have a flow of income coming in. But more so than this is the amount of money coming in, as I've claimed the tax-free threshold for both jobs. All you need to know for the sake of this video is I'm not having as much tax taken out per payslip as is suggested by the tax office for my supermarket job. So instead of having an extra amount of money going to the tax office each payslip, that money is coming into my bank account. And I just owe the tax office that money at the end of the financial year once I do my tax return. Now, I could talk for ages about the different tax tricks involved, but having the extra money now instead of later means that I can have the money in a high interest savings account, meaning it accumulates money that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Example, instead of having $110 from each payslip go to the tax office, instead I only have about $40. That extra $70 each week can go into a high interest savings account and accumulate more interest income than I would have otherwise received if I didn't claim the tax-free threshold. It can be also used for other investments like a stock trade in the meantime too. Maybe that extra $70 goes into a stock and that turns into $140 during that time span. You withdraw the $70 you were meant to have given to the tax office in the first place, and then you keep that extra $70 in your stock portfolio. Who knows? Now, of course, this is risky since if your investment goes down in value, or you make a swing trade / sports bet, you could lose the entire value, or most of it, which is why I said high interest savings account. The banks in Australia are incredibly secure, so there's an extremely minimal chance of this investment going belly up. Even so, you'd get bailed out by the government anyway, so if you're going to use this strategy, just keep the extra money in a high interest savings account, just in case you do need to pay it back. But I'll go over some tax stuff now, and as you'll see, you could possibly not have to pay this amount back to the tax office. The tax-free threshold is outside the scope of this video, but I will mention that this financial year, without any deductions, I would have owed around $14,300 to the ATO. But with the tax deductions and whatnot, I got this down to around $6,557, with the help of my accountant, of course. like I'm more a financial accountant, not specifically a tax accountant, although I do know a bit about tax, but it doesn't hurt to get insight from the experts. Like, my tax accountant has been doing tax longer than I've been alive, so obviously it's extremely arrogant for me to think I know more than he does, so why not pay him for his services and learn something? Once I have an investment property and my business starts generating some income, I will be gained access to a whole heap of new deductions, meaning this could potentially get slashed way down, possibly as low as $2,000, meaning the extra income I received from claiming the tax-free threshold from the supermarket job, I may even get to fully keep, since the tax bill we pay here consists of many factors, such as my student debt or Medicare, which means my tax bill could potentially consist of payments that doesn't even involve paying back the money I essentially borrowed from the tax office. This is one of the many reasons I started this brand/business. The tax deductions you can get from a business are varied and many, whereas with a standard job, you don't get access to many deductions. However, this only works if the business makes enough money, which at this stage it hasn't. Lamau cucked. No tax shenanigans for me. Number 4. Exercise, non-exercise activity thermogenesis and fascia. Alright, so this specifically is a benefit to a supermarket job, warehouse job, fast food job, restaurant job, like I mentioned at the start. If you were, a part-time receptionist at a real estate firm, dental clinic, etc. on the weekends, alongside your full-time office job, this benefit doesn't apply to you. This only applies to active jobs. So when you are on your feet a lot, and when you need to move around a lot, you burn more calories. Now, the department I work in at the supermarket involves a lot of walking around, moving around to different fridges, the back dock, different shelves in the store, etc. If I was at the checkouts, this is a different story. However, you would still be burning calories standing and moving your body/arms, scanning stuff. Way more active than sitting on my ass at the office. Now, I suppose exercise is a strong word, but walking is considered exercise for many people. And I do a lot of walking at my supermarket job. And we also lift some stuff a lot too. So there's that. This also increases non-exercise activity thermogenesis. For those of you who aren't in the fitness space, this is abbreviated to NEAT, NEAT, and it's basically you burning calories from stuff you do that isn't conventional exercise, such as going to the gym, going for a run, going for a swim, playing sports, etc. Now check this. Guess which days I worked at the office, and guess which days I worked at the supermarket. Bingo! The days with heaps of steps, I worked at the supermarket. Now keep in mind, this step count also counts my nightly walk, so on my office days I actually do way less steps than this. It's just that this includes my nightly walk, which pumps up the step count a lot. Same goes with the supermarket job. The step count is inflated. Not all of this is due to work, but you can clearly see the trend. Now also note, this doesn't include any steps I take inside the gym. I have 2 phones. I use my lesser used phone during the gym since it's not logged into any of my social media /stock/investment related apps, as well as my text messages, so I have less shit that catches my attention while I'm in the gym. I mean, it's not as if I doom scroll or get caught up in anything whilst I'm in the gym, but the point is, I have 2 phones, and the iPhone is not used while I'm in the gym. It sits in my bag. I use my Samsung when I'm in the gym for my music, and also because it has a hard protective case, so when I drop the phone or chuck it away before my set starts, the phone doesn't get damaged. The reason I have 2 phones is because I used to be a personal trainer back in 2019, and we had to send out a lot of texts at my workplace, and I was like, yeah, let's get a separate phone for this, and I've had it ever since. So if you were to consider the steps I take inside the gym, my step count would actually be even higher. Now, as for fascia, funnily enough, I touched on this in my other video I did on working 7 days a week, and I said in that video, I wanted to make a fascia video, but I still haven't gotten around to it. But the long and short of it is, your fascia network in your body can get stiff if you don't move enough, and this stiffness can pull on your muscles or restrict movement. So if you don't move around enough, the fascia in certain areas of your body might become tight. The analogy they used when I did my fascia course back in 2019 when I was a personal trainer was movement was like a cobweb duster and your fascia are spider cobwebs. If you move, the cobwebs go away. This is a drastic oversimplification of it, so if you're confused, then don't worry. Eventually, I'll go over it. Or you could just do your own homework on it, of course. Or, if you do know a lot about fascia and you feel I've missed something, that's because I have. I'll talk about it in its own designated video. So, movement helps fascia. Okay. Don't you move enough at the gym? The answer is no. In the gym, I do specific fixed movement patterns for the most part. You know, bringing your elbow across your body, which works your pec, flexing your elbow joint to work your biceps, extending your elbow joint to work your triceps, horizontal shoulder abduction to work your medial delts, etc. There are specific movement patterns you perform to work each muscle, which I've talked about before, but all of these movements aren't the full extent of the way the human body can move. There are other movement patterns you can do, so sitting down in an office all day, then going to the gym some nights don't get my body moving a whole lot. And even on nights I don't gym, I just sit down in front of a laptop/computer, again, like I was doing for the entire workday at the office. But this time I am studying or working on my brand, so not a whole lot of variety in my movements, hey? This is where the supermarket job comes in. Bending down in different positions, lifting up some items in ways you wouldn't lift anything up inside a gym, raising your arms overhead to stack some items on a high shelf. You wouldn't have any of these movements in the gym exactly like this. You'd maybe have something that's close, but the movement patterns you do at an active job are different to what you do in the gym to optimize muscle growth. I saw something ages ago about how many powerlifters' hips will actually stiffen up at a parallel squat. This is because they spend so much time doing that movement pattern that their body adapts to it. Like, I can squat ass to grass with my body weight. I never do this in the gym since your hamstrings run out of length after a certain depth, which can cause butt wink, which can be detrimental to lower back health, but again, outside the scope of this video. But the point is, I can squat ass to grass. But I've seen these powerlifters literally can't since their hips stiffen up/freeze at parallel. Since it's what they've practiced for so long, they've just become accustomed to it. Now, I don't know if this is because of fascia specifically, but this is a perfect illustration of it. They can squat to parallel since they always move like this, but they can't move lower because they haven't done that movement enough. And now they can't. The fascia/cobwebs haven't been dusted off in a while, and now they would need way more effort and focus involved to dust off these cobwebs. This is why an active job helps your fascia, and the gym doesn't quite achieve the same results. You don't want to be all stiff and immobile in your 40s and beyond, because your body got used to the same 15 exercise movement patterns inside a gym and nothing else, because gym is the only physical activity you did for more than a decade. So, in summary, active jobs help you burn more calories, and they keep your body from stiffening up. Number 5. Social life. When you work at a workplace with a large employee count, like a supermarket, naturally, you have a higher likelihood of making friends, since there's more friends to make. I've found in the corporate world at least, making actual friends is a lot less likely. I find it way easier at a supermarket job. Probably because there's less professionalism involved, and also because most of the people working there are closer to your age. It's harder to make friends with someone with kids who's 10 plus years older than you than it is to make friends with some uni students from your supermarket gig. Now, this is becoming less of a thing now that I'm 27, and most of the people at the supermarket are around 17 to 22 years old. Of course, some of them still talk to me and whatnot, but if they had like their 18th birthday or something, I wouldn't really be expecting an invite. Or if they were to have some sort of gathering, I wouldn't be shocked if I didn't get an invite, but we still chat at work, if that makes sense. Back in 2019, when we were all within around 5 years of each other, we'd all hang out whenever someone house sat, whenever someone had a birthday party, we would all go clubbing together, we'd all make fun of co-workers we didn't like in the group chat. Kinda toxic, but let's be real, most workplaces have dynamics such as this. It was a grand old time. We don't hang out anymore. Someone did organise a catch-up recently though. albeit they cut out some of the others and added in some of the newer stuff, but I had to miss this due to studying for my exam. Priorities. So a short section here, a job in like a warehouse, supermarket, restaurant, fast food, all great places to find new friends. Number 6, taking advantage of my situation and the server, Australia. Alright, so I kind of talked about this already, but since we are paid a generous minimum wage here in Australia, my efforts at the supermarket job get me a little further than they would in another country. Additionally, the pay for professional white-collar jobs here simply isn't as good as the United States. If you took my job title, years of experience and company size, and moved that to a comparable location in the United States, I'd be on a higher salary amount. But my supermarket job wouldn't go as far over there. So I'm losing out on my white-collar job here in Australia, but at least I can plug some of that gap with a supermarket job here in Australia. Also, as discussed before, Australia's tax system and government policies incentivise real estate investments, and real estate prices get propped up way more than other countries, except maybe New Zealand and Canada. Although I know New Zealand real estate is on the way down, I know Canada isn't getting any better, and I know it's also bad in the United States and England, but I am fairly certain it's way worse here in Australia. And if it's not worse now, come back in 5 years and we shall see which country has the worst housing affordability. Spoiler alert, I assure you it'll be Australia. So I'm getting in now before it gets worse. If you're on the younger side, like 18 to 23 in the United Kingdom for example, definitely start saving up, but chances are your home prices aren't going to run away like Australia's is, simply because we have too many pillars in the housing market holding it up. Heiser Says goes over this in many of his videos. Now, of course, I don't know much about real estate overseas, but from what I've seen, it's simply just more unaffordable in the land down under, except maybe Canada has it worse. Primary reason is both countries have gone crazy with immigration. Higher demand for houses with little supply compensating obviously pumps up the prices. Now, I know immigration is also going up in the United States as well, but like the amount of immigrants coming in compared to the current population, like the percentage is worse in Canada and Australia than it is in the United States. Not to say that won't impact your housing prices, but it'll just impact them worse in Canada and Australia. And from what I've seen at the time of recording this script, house prices are actually, on the whole, coming down in a lot of parts in the United States, but that's irrelevant anyway because who knows when you're actually watching this, and I'm not the one living in the United States. For all I know, the information I saw was incorrect. So if you're from the US, obviously do your own homework on it. I'm just some dude from Australia speculating based on the information he's seen. So lastly, taking advantage of my situation, I live with my parents to save money, and they live in a small country town. We are about a 2.5-hour drive from Melbourne. If I picked a higher salaried job, I'd need to travel to Melbourne. I don't know about you, but I am not commuting 2.5 hours each way. I'd have no time for gym, no time for study, no time for my brand, all for the sake of an extra $10,000 to $15,000 extra, maybe a bit more. All of which probably gets gobbled up by petrol costs / extra car repairs / train tickets. And even if I did earn 10 to 15k extra discarding those other costs involved, that money is not worth me sacrificing my physique, losing out on my CPA qualification, or not working on my brand, which I believe will pay off eventually. So yeah, living in the middle of nowhere somewhat limits my choices in accounting jobs, unless I want to move, which is too expensive, since I couldn't afford Melbourne real estate for years, and if I chose to rent in Melbourne, that would basically just swallow up any extra money I'd make from working in Melbourne and then some. Case in point, it's literally a much better financial move to live at home with my parents and choosing a lower paying, less prestigious role. You could argue, well, just buy land / a house in Melbourne, then move jobs once that's done. Nope, that idea doesn't work. The capital growth in the area I bought has more upside potential than Melbourne. Trust me, I can delve into the numbers another time, but this move that I made is the most financially sensible, choosing a lower prestige role in the nearest city to where my parents live, which is not Melbourne by the way. I still have to drive an hour up and back, so goes to show how far out they live. So I'm saving money on rent, but I'm paying for it in terms of time. But it's not like the extra hour I'd save each day on travel could be used to make up enough extra money to cover rent anyway. Example, if my rent is $500 a week, but I save 5 hours each week on travel, I don't have any skills currently to ensure a $100 per hour income stream to cover that rent payment from the 5 hours I'm saving from commuting each week. The closest thing I currently have is stock trading, but that's never guaranteed. All of that is a long-winded way of saying I have thought out all possible situations, all possible options, and the one I'm doing now is literally the most feasible, the most sensible, the most lucrative, and overall the best option in the longer run. But what I do have is a less than a 15-minute drive to my supermarket job. There are other places I can work on the weekends, but they're either further out than 15 minutes, which, no thanks, I drive an hour up and back from my office job each day, that's enough travel as is, or the hours aren't as stable and secure, or the work sucks. Such as working at a nearby chicken farm, starting work at 6 AM, meaning I lose sleep and I'd be even more tired by the time I get to gym on a Saturday night, meaning my gains are even more hindered than they already are. Case in point, this supermarket job in a nearby town is perfect for my personal situation. It's literally better to work a lower paying full-time role, but work on the weekends, than it is working a higher paying role, but spending that extra commute time to get there, meaning you'd end up net worse overall when you consider transport costs and opportunity costs with professional designation, brand, your body. But I can talk about all the pros and cons to decisions like this in another video if you guys want, which I've also kinda already talked about before, like the diversified grind and whatnot. So those are 6 main benefits to working at a supermarket job, or a second job, or a weekend job. Case in point, those are benefits to working a secondary job. Now, let's quickly touch on the cons. I say quickly since, let's be honest, you probably already have figured them out. Con 1, trading time for money. So instead of having your weekend off, you're spending it at work. Now, obviously, this is only the case if you work both days. You can work less. You don't have to work 9-hour shifts both days. And to be honest, you probably couldn't get those sorts of shifts for a while anyway if you were to sign up for a second job locally. But regardless, you are spending more time at a job and away from everything else in your life. And since you're paid by an hourly rate, and these jobs are close to minimum wage, you won't get rich doing this. But it can help you get into assets that increase your wealth, such as the example I used with real estate. You could buy stocks. You could fund extra study for your primary career, you could buy products for your business, whatever. So for me, the extra money used from the second job is used to grow my wealth further. Maybe for you it's play money, but you're not going to become stinking rich from working a part-time weekend job. Con 2, exhaustion. You could imagine this gets tiresome after a while, but eat a healthy diet, have a good exercise routine, and get the best sleep you possibly can. Try out CBD gummies. They're basically sleeping pills if you take them at night before bed. And after that, you'll have the energy to sustain this level of grind. And I also found, after doing it for a few weeks, you get somewhat accustomed to the extra work. It's like the gym. No chance could I handle the volume I'm doing now when I started, but you slowly build a tolerance to it. Con 3, societal norms? So if you work a full-time job that's considered prestigious, like accounting, obviously that's not the only prestigious job out there, but it's what's applicable to me. Basically, if you work like a full-time job that required some sort of training or education, like I mentioned in my last video, then people are going to be a little bit confused as to why you're also working a minimum wage job. So people, especially older family members, may question why you're working a minimum wage gig. They seem to think that you're done with that chapter of your life now, just work full time. No doubt they also expect you to be getting a house, getting married, having kids. Hey, guess what? That's a pretty standard life. Nothing wrong with that, and many people do want that, which is totally fine. But I'm not trying to be your standard guy. I'll live my own life. So no, I won't be getting married. Yes, I'll be getting my own house, but that's for me, and it'll primarily be an asset, not a home. Like obviously it will be a home too, but I could have bought some small unit or like a small apartment block, as my home, but I've gone for the larger plot of land in a nice area that can fit 4 bedrooms, primarily as an asset, not a home. And maybe I'll consider kids, but that would require finding the right woman. A story for another video. The point is, working a low-skilled role whilst having another full-time job isn't the usual path in life, hence why many people don't understand. So if you care what people think of you, this second job thing can be an issue at family gatherings or whatnot. But I find it funny though. People who work down on working a second minimum wage job also have never been shredded in their life, let alone lift in general. They don't trade stocks, and those are the same people who try to tell you what to do. No offense, but I'm not trying to be like you. 0 gains and 0 stocks? No thanks. You do you, I'll do me. Con 4. Lower back strain? Working a job like this requires some awkward bending from time to time. I know how to deadlift properly, but when you're in a job, you can't always have the product/weight close to your shins. Sometimes the product is a little further away from your body, meaning it'll cause more strain on your lower back when you lift the object, and that's just how the job is. This is most physical jobs really. Warehouse, fast food, supermarket, restaurant. This doesn't happen at a white-collar office job, although sometimes your lower back can get strained from the way you sit in your chair. So, I guess this is a con of working a weekend job that's physical, but it's not going to cripple you. Hence why I had the question mark. Yes, sometimes after a shift your lower back can feel sore if you had a lot of awkward boxes/items to lift, but it's not like this stays with you. My lower back is fine for most of the time. Sometimes it gets slightly sore from sitting in the chair at the office. Sometimes it gets sore from sitting in the car for an hour plus. Sometimes it gets sore from the weekend job, and sometimes it gets sore from gym. But I suppose that's your lower back in general, hey? I know heaps of people who complain about a sore lower back who don't even lift, who don't even work that much. So the lower back thing is just something to keep in mind when working a physical part-time job. And besides, the tradies have it way worse. So those general part-time minimum wage jobs aren't the worst for your lower back, but they're not the best either. Con 5. I don't know, stress? I'm sure there are other cons you guys can think of, but these are the only cons for me basically. But the only cons for me basically are the job is less spare time in my schedule to do other stuff. And after about 35 days in a row of working, you start to feel overall drained. Which is why I tend to schedule in a day off at either job every month or so. Although this time last year, in like the closing months of 2022, I had no annual leave left because I drained it for my family holiday, so I had to work 67 days in a row. Was pretty rough. Never again. So, I guess you could also say more stress from 2 jobs, but to be honest, the 2 jobs thing reduces my stress since the extra finances fix way more issues than working a second job causes. So maybe like working this second weekend job now causes an issue because now I have to do stuff on the weekend and can't chill out. But now that's fixed another problem of mine, which is saving up for a house, for example. Maybe an issue I have now is, I have to set an alarm for Saturday as well as the other weekdays in the week, but now I'm going to get in almost 20,000 steps today, so it's going to be a pretty active day for my body. So like this second job fixes more problems than it causes for me personally. Like, I'd rather wake up to an alarm and have an active day than sleep in and not have an active day. I'd rather have money to save up for a house than I would having my weekends free. Conclusion. So that wraps up the hidden benefits and cons to working a supermarket job / part-time minimum wage job on the weekends. I say hidden since most people don't understand how much further you can get in investments like real estate from the bump from a second job, as well as the exercise benefits. You'd be surprised how healthy it makes you compared to whatever else you'd probably be doing with your weekends. Are you working 2 jobs at the moment? Do you work at a supermarket? Do you have any questions relating to what I've gone over in this video? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. That is all.